Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar as part of the eFast eFreight Exchange. As you all know, eFast is the initiative hosted by NITI Aayog in partnership with WRI. So today we have with us Mr. Akhil joining from Pulse Energy, and we are planning on diving deeper into understanding zero-emission trucking and freight-related topics, especially on the charging infrastructure more in detail. We are going to quickly start with a brief introduction. I'm planning on speaking a little bit about zero-emission trucking ecosystem broadly from charging infrastructure perspective in India with a little bit of focus on corridor. And after that, we are planning on having a deep dive with Mr. Akhil Jayaprakash from Pulse Energy, where he would share more information about his organization and broadly charging infrastructure related work that is happening in India, all the way from different vehicle sectors, all the way from two-wheelers as well as trucking. After that, I have already jotted down some of the questions for him that we'll go through. And meanwhile, I would encourage all of the audience team members as well to join us in sharing any questions that they might have for us as part of the Q&A. And then we'll save some time in the end for audience Q&A and any reflections and discussions. All right, so with that, I'll then just give a little bit of context in terms of the topic of today's discussion. So thank you again all for joining. My name is Samhita Shiledar. I am Global Transport Decarbonization Director with RMI. RMI is one of the partners of eFast initiative since the inception of the whole initiative. So as I already mentioned, the discussion of today's topic is on freight decarbonization and charging infrastructure in particular. As we all know here, needless to say, freight is the backbone of India's economy, but it is also one of the fastest growing sources of emissions. And as we look to decarbonize this sector, the conversation often starts with vehicles and trucks, but it quickly becomes clear that infrastructure is really one of the critical enablers. And without reliable, accessible, and well planned charging infrastructure, the scale is simply not going to be reached. And when we talk about infrastructure, corridor related development becomes especially critical. This is where a few things comes together because with corridors, first demand aggregation and better asset utilization really helps with trucks becoming more predictable and high traffic routes, especially on corridor use case. Secondly, corridors also help to demonstrate the technical and economic feasibility of trucking at scale. Thirdly, it allows long-term resource and structured resource planning as well as grid planning associated with the trucking decarbonization and trucking deployment. And finally, it enables more targeted and efficient policy implementation. In India, we are already starting to take this taking shape. There are already multiple pilots that are going on with respect to trucking as well as other EV adoption across corridors. The report launched by PSA's office last year in support of RMI has already identified priority corridors based on freight movement, grid readiness, and economic activity. This kind of analysis is important because it helps move from scattered pilots to a more system level aggregated approach. The map here on the map, you can see various corridors that were highlighted with as part of the report, which was launched by PSA. But infrastructure deployment, it's not just about planning challenge, it is also a financing challenge. So at high level, discoms are responsible for the front of the meter infrastructure, things like substations or power lines, while charging point operators are investing in chargers or on-site systems. But in reality, the cost sharing can vary significantly depending on the project, and that really needs to be taken into place while understanding which financing models are going to work the best. So different use cases, depending on public or private charging, are going to need different kind of financing models. Public charging often relies on public-private partnership to get started, while private depot charging requires models such as charging as a service, where fleets don't have to take upfront capex or operational complexity. And for grid upgrades, more coordination between fleets, CPOs, discoms is really required. And overall combination of debt instruments such as loans, line of credit, as well as equity or government fiscal incentives and blended finance incentives are really needed to enable financing in this ecosystem. There is also a lot of emerging opportunity when it comes to better alignment with renewable energy. And we are starting to see models such as managed charging, where fleets shift operations to charge during solar hours and benefit from lower tariffs. Or on site solar is also another pathway, especially for depot based charging to reduce energy costs. And for other larger consumers, open access also allows CPOs to procure renewable power directly from offsite grid development through PPAs. So overall, long story short, the charging infrastructure is definitely deeply interconnected problem, interconnected opportunity. So it is definitely about infrastructure, but it's also about utilization, financing, coordination, execution on the ground. And what makes this space even more interesting is that charging for trucks or freight vehicles is not just going to be about hardware, it is also going to be about aligning logistics patterns, grid readiness, land utilization, and different business models. So in India, we are already seeing a lot of strong momentum, early pilots, growing interest broadly, but then we also need to understand cost coordination and rest of the um, different opportunities in this ecosystem really well, which is why it's really valuable to hear from people who are actually building and operating in this space at scale, which is where our today's guest, Mr. Akhil, comes in. I'm really looking forward to having detailed discussion with him and really looking forward to his presentation as well. We have a very special guest with us today, Ms. Archana Mittal. So I want to first of all pass it off to her to share her keynote remarks. Ms. Archana Mittal is Program Director, E-Mobility, Governance and Reforms, as well as Youth Affairs and Sports Infrastructure Connectivity at NITI Aayog. She brings over 25 years of experience in various roles in Government of India across diverse sectors, ranging from Indian Railway Services to transport sector, social sector, and urban development sector. She is also part of the leadership team as part of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, as well as Government of India's national flagship schemes on urban poverty alleviation as well as smart cities mission. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us today and would really request you to share some of the keynote remarks to open our today's discussion. First of all, pass it to ma'am and then go ahead with rest of the scheduled presentation from Akhil.
Thank you. Thank you, Samita sir. This was very good able to join the call. Ashana ma'am, thank you so much for your time to join eFate Exchange, which is a part of the series where we hear from practitioners. We'd like to hand over the baton to you. Just speak about your two words about the firm and about the ecosystem in general.
Okay, so good morning to everyone. I think there was some technical glitch which took me a little longer to join. I think I can see 34 participants in the meeting, and I'm really curious to know who these people are, but I don't know whether that was a part of the introduction.
Ma'am, we haven't done introductions, but maybe this is a really
Okay,
good prompt if all of the participants want to add their quick
that's
introduction, what
okay. That's okay.
organization
I
they
think
work.
your timelines are going to get disturbed if you do that. So that's okay. But I think today we are here to talk on a very important subject under the aegis of eFast. eFast, as I understand, there are more than 20 knowledge partners which have been onboarded on this platform, which includes original equipment manufacturers, charge point operators, shippers, logistics service providers, financiers, think tanks. So some of them are perhaps in the audience today. And this is exactly what I think is the USP of this forum, that it brings together so many stakeholders of the electric ecosystem, trucking ecosystem, on a common platform. So you all know about eFast. You know it stands for Electric Freight Accelerator for Sustainable Transport. You know it was launched in 2022, and now it has been going on for the last more than 3 years. The primary objective has been electrification of trucking segment, especially the medium and heavy trucking segment. This segment especially is tricky because the batteries are heavy, they are expensive. They not just reduce the cargo capacity due to their load, but also increase the downtime for charging. So I think with this intent, this platform was created so that all these stakeholders can be brought together, and with each other we can kind of find common ground where we can introduce pilots, where we can get confidence from these projects to be able to undertake larger investments. I believe this platform should have something for everyone. For government, of course, we want EFAS to surface data, real world data from pilots, from corridor projects, which can help us fine tune regulations, which can help us decide subsidies, what subsidies and how much is to be given where, which can help us decide on what kind of grid upgradation is required to be planned for e-trucks. For OEMs, they can, the demand aggregation can help them reduce uncertainty about volumes. They can plan investments in truck production. All these joint pilots, which are being done with everyone, they can help generate operating data, which can help us fix so many problems, which can help OEMs refine vehicle specifications. Charge point operators, of course, we know a common problem in charging. And we normally keep on saying there is no charging infrastructure. And then we keep on saying when it gets created that there is no utilization. So the two can only be resolved when the location of charging points is strategic. And then only CPOs will find use in, the business case for these charge points. Logistics service providers, shippers, we know that these people can get the confidence to invest in e-trucks fleet. Financiers can have the confidence as they can see that the risk perceived can be lesser for them. So I think each stakeholder should have something in it, and I would say that we should get a little ambitious and expect more from this forum. And this is what I would want each one of you to think, that how can we make this platform very powerful? How can we actually use it to take e-trucking to its next big milestone? So with that, thank you. And I would be very keen to listen to our next speaker from Akhil. I'm very keen to listen to you. Let me hear and if you can address some of my, whatever I've said, what would you want there to be from this platform, then it would be good. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. And I think ma'am has already shared the context and a big task of answering some of these questions right away. So with that, Akhil, over to you for the presentation. And
Thank you.
meanwhile, just a quick request to all of the participants, if you have any questions, please use Q&A feature as part of the Zoom to type out your questions. Thank you.
Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. We have been on ground for the past 3 to 4 years, building and figuring out what are the right places to set up chargers and how do you improve utilization of those charging infra. So it's great to kind of share what we have learned through the years in such a condensed format. I'll just start with just quickly give you an introduction on what Pulse Energy does. So we are like a digital energy platform. Think of it as every single EV charging transaction that goes through the country, any sort of energy output or transaction that goes through the country, we would ideally want to process it. And I'll talk about why it's important for us to kind of get that nailed down. Today, we are the largest EV charging aggregator. 6% of all charging transactions across the country go through us. 90% of the India's EV charging infrastructure is already connected to our platform. So if you are a logistics provider, you want to access EV charging infra, you can just plug into us and we'll offer you access to almost all the charging infra out there. Three of us who started this, one of the key foundational blocks when we started this from day one was that we're going to build the DPI for energy. That was the day one philosophy that we had, which is we didn't want to do anything in a closed loop manner. We wanted to build it in an open loop manner. So we actually partnered with Nandan sir and Pramod sir and sort of conceived the seed of building like a climate DPI model for India. And this started like two and a half years back, and now there are different variations of it, and I'll talk about it, what is happening. But in a nutshell, this is what we do, right? So if you look at, there are supply side folks who are logistics, the Amazon trucks, the last mile vehicles, and then there are charging infra on the other side. We essentially just provide both of them a place to sort of meet with each other and consume energy. That is how this fundamentally works. And we do that matchmaking. And through that, you get a lot of insights and data. And that's what I will show you through this, which is how did we figure out in a highway, what is the right places to kind of set up and deploy chargers? We have that insights now. So I'll get into the basic fundamentals that is needed to set up a charger, right? So if you are out there, you have some capital and you're a CPO, you want to figure out, okay, where do I deploy chargers? Three things that you fundamentally need. And this is, you cannot compromise on these three things. You need to make sure that you check these three boxes, because every unit that your charger dispenses is going to matter, because it's a very margin-driven business. You need to make sure that you check all these three boxes. You cannot overlook any one of them. Hardware. The first thing is you got to have a reliable hardware. Focus on the OEMs that provide you the best efficiency, the least downtime. And there are benchmarks available in the market. A lot of players out there that's been looking at charging data for past 3 years. We in fact have that level of information as well, which shows you the efficiency of the chargers from an OEM perspective. And I'll zoom into that heat map that is out there. But that's a key criteria, because if you have identified the right location, you have set up the charger, if that charger does not work consistently every single minute, you're going to face consequences. And just to benchmark this, we were speaking to a European CPO. Their success failure rate, which is the number of times that someone hits on start charging and the charger actually starts charging, is less than like 2% in Europe. While it's in India, the average is about 30%. Like 3 out of 10 charging requests will not start. That's how bad the situation is today, right? And I think it's a function of the market. Once the market sort of matures to that degree, all of this will sort of come down. We'll be in the sub 5% failure rate. And that's the world that we want to be. So the guidance, when you look at it from selection of the hardware, get the benchmarks, understand what's the best hardware out there, what are the reliable ones, and then deploy it. Software. Again, we don't believe in the mantra of charging per gun or charging per charger. The way we look at this is, again, from DPI first thinking, right? You need an enablement tool that's free for you. You take that, we work on bringing traffic to you, and that's how we're going to make money. So when we look at Pulse as a business, the way we think about how software should be consumed in this is that that's a commoditized aspect of this infra. Provide that for free. Make money when you drive up traffic, because the CPO has invested the almost 95% of the infra cost to setting up the charger. You offer this. And just to give you a data point, in fact, one of the well-known CPOs out there, we've done a 10x increase in their utilization of the network. That is, they were doing X 6 months back, sometime in August 2025. And as of last month, we were like 10x of what that traffic was. So this is purely because, good partners, software digital partners, will go and get that traffic for you. They will figure out what's the right way, who's the right partners, who are the logistics players. You simply need to figure out, okay, how do I make sure that the chargers are up and running? And are they going to go down? What are the operations aspects that I need to nail? We'll make sure that the traffic comes to you. The third aspect of this is you cannot be flying blind in this operation at all. You need to get a data partner. We have a data analytics service. You need to get one. If it's not just us, but I want to make sure that every CPO has like a data scientist with them or a data analyst with them, because you need to be looking at your charger data day in and day out, figure out what are the patterns, why is it behaving in this way, why is the unit consumption less today. If you don't look at that data, you're just looking at, whenever someone calls you, if there's a problem, that's a bad signal. You have to make sure that you look at that data, and I'll show you what we look at, right? So now I'll go to the hardware piece. Just to give you this as an example, This is the efficiency of, a group of a logistics provider. Whenever they look at starting at, like, let's say 20% SOC when the charging starts, what is the typical efficiency of the charger in itself? And as it approaches very high SOCs, some of those OEMs are not that efficient. You can start seeing that sort of degrade. While it's at a low percentage, you get apples to apples, you get, like, let's say 1 unit of energy, almost 1 unit comes out of the charger. As it's, if a person is about 80% and then trying to charge, the efficiency actually goes down. Now, these are data tools that you can look at to understand, okay, what's the efficiency through and through. And these things vary over time as well. Like, so for example, in Mumbai, now it's going to be summer season. So it's going to be summer, it's humid. Can chargers perform in the same manner? Like, there is a problem with efficiency there. Like, if it's in cold regions, there's a different efficiency. Where if it's a warm and humid, there's a different efficiency. And it varies during the day as well. So during 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock peak, heat, you're going to get that efficiency going to go down. And when it's overnight, it's actually much better. So there are things like this that happen. You need to be tracking these metrics in order to understand what kind of hardware should you deploy in the long run. And you don't need to go out there and try each and every hardware OEM today. We have the data. The market already has the data. We specifically have this information. We can share this with you and help you figure out what are the right vendors that you need to navigate with or to have a conversation with to figure out this is the infrastructures that you need. The second one is, again, this comes to the analytics piece, right? So that I showed you earlier. Where do I deploy a charger, right? This is just pure logistics signals that we get. There is no charger information on this. This is purely telling us which vehicles, how many vehicles are there in Bangalore, and of those vehicles, how many vehicles have a low percentage battery capacity at that particular point in time, and are there chargers nearby? So case in point, this particular hex bin that I've just opened up, that has 86 vehicles, which has a SOC less than 40%. And in a 1 kilometer radius, there is no chargers. Like, that's a hotspot right there, right? Like, this is that whole Maratali stretch in Bangalore. So you can see there's a lot of corporate employee transport that will happen there. And this is a great area to deploy a charger, for example. And for example, yeah, in this area, there might have already been some players deployed chargers. But if you go down that stretch in that Marathali area, then you can see that it becomes warmer there. And that's the same context, right? So we are looking at vehicle level data, seeing where vehicles typically drain out of battery, and then surfacing that insight over to you. We're essentially giving you that insights, and this is as of like 8:47 in the morning today. So we keep, refreshing this, and this is the information that we are offering to the CPOs to kind of figure out this is where you can start thinking about deploying infra, because there's demand here and supply doesn't exist in those areas, right? So there is actual vehicles there. Case in point, like the reddest spot here, that's got 36 vehicles with an average SOC of 13%, and there's no chargers nearby. Like, that's the hottest area right now. And tomorrow that may not be, right? Like, because traffic patterns shift. So once you put up a charger there, that spot will completely go away. That's the level of analytics that every CPO has to go to in order to build a successful business. So this is the first part of this, which is helping you understand hardware, benchmark it, software, get a partner who helps you drive traffic. Don't get a partner who's just going to say, okay, I'm going to build you the digital energy platform and charge you for a charger basis. That's not the right manner, because they're never incentivized to improve your business. They're incentivized to make sure that they get money. Simple as that. The third pillar of this is analytics. Figure out what are the signals that you can capture from the market, build that analytics stack. It's very critical for the success of the business. So with this, I'll sort of move into one of the efforts that we've been working with the EFAST team, and it's still very early, but I will give you a glimpse of this. And I'll switch to map view. So this is something that we are building out. It's going to be a national dashboard that we're going to publish it out. It's open. We're not going to put any paywall, nothing on top of it. But this are all the electricity lines available in our country with substations. So these are individual substations that are there. And if there are any solar plants set up, that information as well. Are there any restaurants nearby? And we are working on something very interesting to find out the data of vehicle sales as well. So we're trying to figure that out. So you can see vehicle data that come in. It's still a little raw, but let me just give you a use case of a highway, right? So now with this information, let's assume that I want to set up a charger between Bangalore and Chennai. So you have Chennai right here. And we also have mapped all the toll gates across the country. So you have Krishnagiri toll gate here. I can just zoom into this and see at the toll gate, where are the ones where the connections are there? These are there's a 220 kilowatt connection here. That's a transmission line right there. There's a substation as well over here. And there are a few restaurants near this. So if I zoom in real quick, from this toll gate, there is one restaurant here, another one here. There's a substation right there from Tamil Nadu. And there are transmission lines of a 220 kilowatt, right? So it's highly likely that I could get a connection here in this area. And similarly, we're going to open this up for everyone. But the idea here is to give you that insights as to, okay, what data points would you need to kind of make those decisions? And within the city, same thing, right? You can zoom into the city and see where all do you need chargers, or where all do you prefer to put up chargers. So for example, if there are restaurants here that you feel are very populated, then makes sense. Put up a type 2 charger. It doesn't cost much. They already have the excess power. It makes perfect sense to set it up from a type 2 point of view. So we'll soon add workplaces. We'll add a lot of other data layers into it. But this is a pan-India dashboard that we're going to deploy. So we mapped out for every single point. We've mapped out toll gates. We will overlay this with RTO data as well. But net, this will be open to public. It is for everyone to consume. We are not looking at monetizing this. Obviously, there will be certain set of data sets that will be a monetizable one. But right away, if anyone wants to decide where do I set up a charger, this is in progress work that's happening right now, but I believe this is the right forum to sort of talk about this. So coming back into how do you prepare for highway locations, I just spoke about this. Look at toll gates, see what connections or transmission lines are nearby. What are the existing charging stations in that area? Is there a substation that you can tap into? Once you earmark all of it, then you look at the restaurants, approach those restaurants. Like this is the easiest way to go figure this out, right? Rather than doing road trips that some CPOs do, you can just look at this at the comfort of your home, figure out and isolate which restaurants you want to call, and then book an appointment and go talk to them. So that's the level of ease of use that we're building at Pulse. So now I'm going to switch gears into, now that we have seen sort of, hey, what is needed to build a great charging ecosystem? You've understood data, and the spirit of us offering this data is from an open point of view. And this goes into why everyone should have a DPI native approach when it comes to charging. And just to give you those context, right? Like what are the two big initiatives in this country that is DPI first? So there's something called Unified Bharat E-Charge. The name is again TBD, but it's an interoperable EV charging network that is being set up by MHI and NPCI, where all EV chargers across the country, the plan is to make all EV chargers across the country available via UPI apps. So accessibility is going to be paramount, right? Like every single, you're not going to be in a world where it's fragmented applications. It's just going to be ubiquitous. It'll help increase utilization. So if you're a charge point operator, you talk to us, by default, your charges are going to be on all UPI apps. Like that's the way we are looking at this. This is a DPI that you should take advantage of. If you're not taking advantage of it, please do. The second and the most important one, and we had the opportunity to demo this to the Honorable PM at AI Summit, which was how do you get green energy to that user, cheaper green energy? So Samita talked about setting up solar on-site, accessing solar through open access. The intent there is obviously to reduce the cost of energy. What we did was something very radically different. We essentially said, look, there are a lot of farmers in this country and they have access to a lot of surplus land. What if we could empower them to set up solar parks or solar rooftops on their rooftops? And we could use that to trade. And the arbitrage is amazing because they get about 2.5 rupees to 3.5 rupees today per unit when they export energy back into the grid. While as the CPO might be getting billed about 8 rupees or 10 rupees per unit from the grid when they have to take energy in. The arbitrage is 8 rupees to 3.5. So we found a medium. There's a market discovery that happens, and the farmers sell for 5. The CPOs purchase it for 5.5. Everyone makes money. And that is as simple as online shopping. In fact, yesterday we had a CPO with about 20 locations in Delhi. They just downloaded our app, added their meters, and just got online and then started purchasing energy. So we literally now have like 20 farmers in UP, selling energy into this market. Again, the power of DPI, right? Like the comment that the CPO made was, hey, this is as simple as online shopping, because I could just, I don't need to do a long-term commitment. I just needed it to try it out for one day. I was able to do it. I didn't have to go to a discom's office or apply for a certain certifications or access, nothing. All they need to do is just enter their meter number, get an OTP like an Aadhaar verification, and then get started. It's as simple as that. So that's the goal of DPIs, is to make it incredibly easy to consume services out there. And that's what these DPIs are doing. And again, the one takeaway that I would have for everyone in this group is, if you're building a charging network, please start thinking DPI first. That's the only way you're going to get a 10x scale from where you are. Because the day you take that step and you are on that boat, you're going to get access to cheaper energy. You're going to get access to a lot of traffic. And that data can now get utilized by financiers to finance your assets as well. Because today, a financier is like that entire transaction is opaque. Like, what have you done? What is the performance of your charging assets today? You don't have that information. You have to download it from a CMS and then give it to the investors or give it to the financiers. This becomes a more reliable mechanism, like account aggregator that we have today, where you can, through authorized DPIs, you can access the bank statements for a particular user. Similarly, DPIs will come up to do all of this, like financiers will come in. These are the fundamental building blocks that the country is building. Please do take advantage of it. It's only going to help accelerate your business. The last thing where I would look at, okay, what is it one thing that you can take away from this? We simply look at analytics and we tell you what's going wrong, right? So we can literally look at this and say, there are 58 plugs that's set up there, and here are the number of chargers that's actually being utilized at a peak. So we can get that information. Again, this is a little historic data, but the idea here is we offer free diagnostics of your entire network to understand what is being utilized, what is not being utilized. If it's not being utilized, can we help drive traffic there? Case in point, if you look at this is about 10 o'clock in the morning to like 6 o'clock in the evening. Almost only 10% of your chargers are actually being used. And these are AC chargers where someone's parking and charging. You can literally start offering that into the market. What we did with the CPOs, we partnered with them and started saying, okay, let's just drive traffic to that particular charging points. We'll bring in that traffic to you. You got to offer at this rates, provide it to fleet operators out there. And this has worked out brilliantly because they know that they only need it during these hours. So the takeaway for anyone who's listening to us, to this particular conversation, I think, just ping me on LinkedIn or email. We happy to go take a look at a free diagnostics and tell you what needs to be done. Okay. And the last thing I would do, there's a policy recommendation, since we're talking about, eFast as a forum, the way I would look at this is DPI first thinking. Like, let's just mandate that, right? Like, that's something that we need to cultivate as a culture across this forum. Yes, we need more financing for chargers. It's a no-brainer. But the third and the last more critical one in this is digitizing the grids. Because so far we have all the DPIs existing for charging infra and land and everything, but the grid is the only piece that's not been digitized. And I think that's something that only a policy push would help go to that direction. And I think it's necessary for this country. If at all we are looking at freight transitions, we need to do that. So thank you. That was my part of this. And hopefully this is an enlightening conversation for all of you. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, Akhil, for sharing such detailed presentation. Very, very insightful. Request to all of the participants to just add any questions that you might have for Akhil. We can answer those. But before that, I also just had some follow-up questions based on your presentation. The first one that I had was I really found the some of the graphs and the whole interface that you shared really interesting in terms of understanding how the entire grid ecosystem is currently working in India broadly. There is also already one question. You gave an example of Bangalore, but if you could also speak to the geographic scope of your operations right now. But along with that, I also wanted to check and understand from you, especially in the context of freight vehicles. What do you think are the most important factors when it comes to choosing sites for electric truck charging along the high volume freight corridors? How do we select the corridors, and how, after selection of the corridors, a lot of work that has already been done by PSA, MHI, how exactly do you go about identifying the right charging infrastructure site? If you could
Yep.
share any of your thoughts on that.
So right now, the tool that I showed you, right? So I'll just answer the first question and then get into this. So the first one is, this is Pan India. So we have mapped all the transmission lines across the country. We have mapped all the toll gates across the country. We have mapped all substations across the country. And we have mapped all the restaurants and hotels across the country. There are more data points that we want to collect. So the way we are looking at this is, any data point that helps make a decision on charging infra, we want to start populating it there. I'm happy to sort of connect with folks offline and figure this out. To now coming to your question, Samita, the way we look at this is, we want to essentially offer a space where you have access to the power information, you have access to the retail foot ground, because whenever someone is charging there, especially in highways, people prefer to have a pit stop rather like a restaurant or a restroom, like those kind of areas. And that's the reason why we are putting all of these multi-dimensional data points together, just so that that information is there in one place. Because typically today, what happens is there's a recce that happens that every CPO does, right? So you
Right.
identify the freight corridor, a recce happens across that stretch, go and talk to folks and understand, okay, who does this land belong to? The key thing that we want to unlock, start unlocking the layer ones first, right? Layer ones is like transmission line, substations, restaurant data, all of that. Layer two is going to be land parcel data, right? Like every single district has that information. How do you get access to land ownership data? How do you get access to land parcel data? What is the segmentation of the land? All of this helps you figure out, okay, now there is if there's a toll gate, a substation, a cluster of restaurants and restrooms, like that's the perfect spot. Then you know that, okay, there's an ample amount of power available and a good transmission line going above it. You have an ideal sweet spot, right? But and on top of it, if we can get some traffic data as well, then nothing like it. You actually get to know how busy that corridor is as well, and we'll figure out ways to get that information. But that's sort of the conditions that you need to look for, and that's one of the motivations of building this national dashboard, which was, we've got to open this up and leave it to people, right? And then just put a small feedback box at the bottom saying that, okay, here's more information that I need, let us know, right? So that's the goal. But again, if anyone has feedback on what other data points that we should add, please do let us know.
No, 100%. I think that's a really good point. Could you also speak a little bit about sizing of charging infrastructure as well as sizing of batteries? What I mean by that is, when it comes to identifying the right type of zero emission truck that can run on a particular corridor of certain length, it is really important to make sure that the battery is right size based on the payload that is there, the range that is required. And at the same time, even the infrastructure needs to, the charging infrastructure needs to be sized right to meet the demand that a particular use case has. And on top of that, the grid also needs to be proactively planned to manage the peak load as well. So could you speak about sizing of the battery charging infrastructure as well as proactive grid planning, and how does digital unified infrastructure unlock that?
Correct. So the way I would split this out is, you first have to look at the density of vehicles that go through it. So the density times the battery capacity sort of gives you the total volume of traffic that's going to come in. And that becomes a function of what sites would you select. And typically, right now, the deployments that I've seen, they end up having, they have to have backup power. Like, some freight corridors cannot afford a downtime, right? So even if you have the greatest and the largest sort of, transformers, power capacity available, there will be some outages and outages happening. So I've seen some of the really good charging networks out there. They set up battery packs as well, provide that ancillary power. The only way I think to answer your point of, can we get to a world where we have all of these things aligned, like battery capacity, charging capacity, and power capacity? The thing that's missing there is the reliability factor of all of this. Like, even if I put enough amount of money to build that infrastructure out, the fact that the reliability of power is going to be the Achilles heel of that infra. And the only way to do that
Right.
is, figure out digitization of the grid, or you double down on more battery packs, double down on solar panels, which I don't think is the right thing for the CPO to do. Because I would rather have the CPO invest in providing more receptacles to charge more vehicles in tandem, rather than then having to figure out how do you do power, right? So that's where the DPI thinking will come in, because once we make this DPI native, grid operators can come in and say, okay, you know what? I now have access to data. I can take a better decision. This is what is happening. Like, if, for example, the chargers, if they're on the DPI for EV chargers, they can figure out what's the capacity of the chargers on this stretch of road. Let me figure that out. Okay, this stretch has a high density of chargers with this much amount of capacity. I'm going to make sure that the transmission lines here are upgraded, or ensure that they're not connected to some rural feeders out there. Like, that's the level of evolution that can happen if you think DPI first. So that's the way I would frame it as a response. I know I didn't get to the exact point of your question answer, but
No, that
that's
makes
how I would
sense.
put it.
No, 100%. There are also some questions on the similar theme. One of the questions
Yeah.
is, what are the most common mistakes that you're seeing in infrastructure planning right now, especially for electric trucks from the infrastructure that has been deployed so far? So based on the current experience thus far, and how important it is for demand flexibility and fleet commitment in making infra projects bankable and operationally viable. From a business model perspective, what will it take for making electric medium and heavy duty vehicle charging infrastructure commercially sustainable? A lot of questions to unpack,
Yeah.
but kind
I
of
would
broad thoughts in terms of planning and viability.
So the way I would look at this is, start with who's going to consume the chargers. I think there's a program by I think Amazon, the C40 initiatives that they do, where again they are open to offering that information about what's the traffic going to be like. Obviously, they're going to have some harsh metrics in terms of figuring out, hey, if you don't charge the vehicle, or if there's a delay, then there's going to be penalties and stuff. But I would always say, start with demand first, or utilization first. Start thinking in that direction. I think that's the most common mistake that I have seen, where people haven't, like, you're not doubling down on getting that information first. Like, just get that information
Right.
first. Rest of it will flow as it needs to be, right? So that'll be the first thing. And just to give you like how important demand visibility and fleet commitment, 100%. Like, you can't. It's a chicken and egg problem. I don't think there's a point of like the last math that we did just to set up a charger in like between Bangalore to Chennai with charging for buses. That's easily a 1 to 2 crore commitment from a CPO's point of view. If they're not going to get that outcome from a dedicated set of fleets, it's just not going to be viable. It doesn't make sense. No one's going to give out free money. So yes, so my input is always start with who's going to consume, get those consumers and say, okay, what is it that you guys need in order for me to build a reliable infra for the next 5 years? And what is it? And lock that commitment. And people will be happy to offer that kind of commitment. There are customers who will offer that kind of commitment, because that's sort of the route that they're looking at applying on. So that will be the first step that I would say. Again, all of this is going to be offline for the couple of years. After this, it'll become digital later on, but that's what I would answer as hey, that's the first
Yeah.
mistake you should not be doing. So yeah.
No, makes sense, makes sense. Another question is, what is a good utilization percentage if you were to put a number that a CPO should aim for at charging infrastructure to achieve reasonable ROI?
20%. 20% is where the gold strikes. So if you hit at a particular site, if you hit a 20% utilization, it's just a good place to be in, because rest is just pure margins. Simple.
Mm. Makes sense. While we are at numbers, another question is in terms of just understanding the electricity rates or charging rates. Everyone is talking about infra, but charging rates is also equally important. It must be below 10 rupees per unit. And has it been offered anywhere on highways? And if you also have any thoughts in terms of that number of 10 rupees per unit, if you have done any kind of back of the envelope calculations, detailed calculations based on your work.
See, I think below 10 is just non-feasible, right? Like if I'm spending a crore or two to set up a charging infra with demand that is going to be flaky, 10 is just not going to fit it. Like it's very difficult to do that. The way I would look at this is a function of market and competitive and price discovery. Very simple. Leave that up to the market, right? There will be models that will come in the future where, like, for example, you want 10 rupees per unit. There will be companies in this market who will figure out how to get you that 10 rupees. It might not be by saying, I'm going to straight away discount it. It might be through other forms of, discounts. It might be that, okay, I will reduce the cost of shipping something from point A to point B. Hence that you might still be paying 30 rupees per unit, but the shipping cost might be so low, the net cost reduction or the cost impact will be low. So there are different ways of playing this out. My humble request is, we should always incentivize CPOs who set up a reliable infra. And if you need to cultivate that sort of behavior, you have to let them figure out what the right price point is going to be. And for example, if I'm running a business and I want to get this thing through point A to point B, I want to make sure I'm partnering with a reliable CPO. And I'm okay offering the rate that they would want to make sure that they can sustainably do that. Very simple. Like if they want to put up another person on that station, making sure the drivers who come there can figure out seamlessly how to connect, and they're charging me 2 rupees extra for that, completely fine. Like that'll be the first valet-based charging system, right? Like that, and that's completely okay. And the same impact would happen even if you're traveling with a family. You don't want to be stuck in the middle of the road looking at a charger which is not able to do anything, and you're like, and that might be for $10, but what's the value, right? You're stuck in a car with low range and then at a charger that's not going to charge at all. So I would rather pay a little bit of premium to get a more reliable service. And that's the function of the market. So people will figure this out in the long run. Like I've seen retail users who come to us and say, hey, you know what? I know across the highway which are the better ones and the cheaper ones. Like people already do that. Like once you do like few stretches, they're like, okay, I know these ones. If they don't work, then I know which is the next expensive ones. Like, so when we spoke to our users about, hey, is this a price thing for you? And they're like, yeah, for a more mature, like if I'm driving by myself, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the value conscious chargers first and then figure out if they don't work, then I'm going to figure out the next one because I know where they are. But for a new person, or if they're driving with their family, they're never going to do those. So leave it like that nuances. I'm going to leave it up to the market to go figure it out.
Yeah. Since you also spoke about partnerships, there are a few questions about what kind of partnerships or what kind of collaboration is needed. So one of the questions is just building on Archana ma'am's point, what kind of collaboration is needed among different stakeholders to enable strategic placement of infrastructure? And then on similar lines, what would an ideal collaboration model between public and private sectors look like for truck charging infrastructure as well as grid infrastructure? So two very similar questions on collaboration side.
I would say again, DPI infrastructures is a public partnership, public and private partnership model. Very simple. That is where Sarkar and Samaj comes together. DPI is meant for that. So the portal that we built is built on DPI data. They are open data sets that's available, that's been issued by the government for a specific DPI purpose. That's what we should do. So I don't see a need for you to build separate partnerships. I would say adopt DPI structures to do this. So in this particular case, at least for the request of what would we need to make trucking successful in India, access to land parcel data. Like that's the information that we don't get access to. Who owns that land? Who has access to that land? What are the land parcels that's available? That gives us a whole different perspective when we look at that particular highway data, and even density. Like there are government bodies who have data on how much vehicles ply through those highways on a daily basis and categorized by vehicle type. That's another DPI thinking approach, right? Like if we can start, not we, as in if private entities are able to access that information in a very secure manner, like the national dashboard that we have set up, it just becomes easier for them to go manage and figure that out. So that's my answer. If there's a partnership, I don't think we should build a new one. I think just look at a DPI thinking approach, piggyback on existing DPI initiatives to unlock that value, because that becomes there's people, a lot of people putting a lot of mental bandwidth in figuring out, okay, is this the right one? Like there's that question and problem statement, and the people who have built DPI are the ones building this out as well. So a lot of that handwork is already being done by people.
Makes sense. And any additional thoughts in terms of what CPOs and fleet operators should consider, especially when they are looking at states with high and uneven fixed as well as development cost, while making sure that the margins there are also margins in terms of profitability.
Yeah, this is so the way I would look at this is it's a it goes to that price discovery conversation, Samita, that I was speaking out, right? Like you have to make sure that we let the market figure out what the price is, and they symbiotically figure that out. CPOs need the money to make sure that they build a successful and reliable business. So that's where I would put my answer to.
Makes sense. Archana ma'am, would you also like to share any thoughts or just any concluding remarks as we get closer to the end of the session today?
No, I just want to thank Akhil. I think it was a really informative, in-depth presentation. And I want to ask you, are you based out of Delhi or Bangalore or where?
I'm in Bangalore. I'm coming to Delhi next week. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe you could find some time for a meeting with us.
Sure.
We are working on certain programs, city saturation program, and other things where I think some of the inputs that you gave, we would like to really talk about those in depth.
Done. I'll do that. I'll take
All
your
right.
digits from Kaustubh. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Akhil, there are maybe just last couple of questions that you might want to answer while we are just have a couple more minutes before ending the webinar.
Yep.
Some are just with respect to broad state of the market. How many charging stations do you think are there? Are there more charging infrastructure for long haul or last mile delivery? And if you also want to share any thoughts in terms of integrity, safety of charging infrastructure with respect to quality in particular.
Correct. I'll answer the first one, which is number of chargers that are there, right? So right now, I think official numbers about 30,000 chargers. This will start getting, like, there's a DPI that is being deployed, which will give us a real-time data on number of chargers that has been out there. I think the government has commitments to deploy up to 1 lakh charging points across the charging stations across the country. I think that's a perfect target. From a reliability and integrity of chargers point of view, again, this goes back to the conversation that I spoke about earlier, which is when you're selecting a charger, make sure that you do the due diligence on hardware. There are benchmarks in the market that you can get today about how a charger operates. There is 5 years worth of data in this market. And everyone, like year one was the time when everyone looked at, okay, I'm just going to build a charger and deploy it. Year two is people figuring it out, okay, this is not working. Year three is when supply chains start getting mature. Processes are improved. Year four, year five is just true test of who can last and who can build a better quality charger. So we have all of that insights and benchmarks within our ecosystem. I'm happy to sort of share and figure out, okay, this is the right thing or not. But you have to do that diligence before you commit to building out or buying a particular charger.
Perfect. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Akhil. I feel like there are already a lot more questions with respect to policy as well as viability of charging infrastructure, which you already have touched upon, and few folks also have asked for your contact information as we go forward. So we'll share that with the webinar link. The webinar is also going to be uploaded on YouTube, so you'll be able to see that. But thank you so much again for sharing all of your thoughts. The conversation could really go on for much longer, but I think we'll take rest of the questions offline between all of the partners. Thanks again for the entire WRI as well as the entire WRI team in terms of just hosting this panel. And